All right, Klein chuckled. Suddenly, he realized that she was wearing a dress he had never seen before. It was entirely beige in color. It had fashionable engagements. The collar and edges of her top had thin frills. Apart from that, it was a rather simple design, the type one wore as daily casual clothing. It fully accentuated the youth of a 16 or 17-year-old. New dress? Klein asked with a smile. It was a purchase that he and Benson had insisted upon. Melissa answered in the affirmative tersely. I just took it back from Mrs. Rochelle. I was thinking that since I had to wash it later, I might as well try it on first. Klein was rather puzzled when he heard that. Mrs. Rochelle? Wasn't she our former neighbor? Melissa nodded and explained in all seriousness. Mrs. Rochelle is actually a seamstress, but she was quite unlucky. She had no choice but to sew and mend clothes for others at home. She leads a pretty tough life. I knew that she had pretty good skill, and the price she quoted is cheaper than at a women's clothing store. Furthermore, it's very well tailored to my figure, so I ordered a new skirt from her. It only cost 9 soldi and 5 pence and took only a few days. A dress of a similar style would cost 3/2 of a pound at Harrods department store. What a frugal girl. Sis, I know that at least half the reason is due to your pity of Mrs. Rochelle. Klein did not reproach Melissa for deciding things for herself. Instead, he said with a smile, When did you go to Harrods? That was at Howes Street, near the Divination Club. It was somewhere where the middle class shopped. Melissa was momentarily at a loss for words. It took her a long while before she said, It was Selina and Elizabeth. They insisted I accompany them. Actually, well, I actually prefer gears more. I like places with steam and machinery. Yeah. It's quite, well, nice for a girl to occasionally shop at a department store. Klein laughed as he comforted his sister. After some idle talk, he briskly walked to the second floor, hoping to wash away the repulsive mixed smells from the bar. Just as he was about to return to his bedroom to get a change of clothes, he suddenly heard sounds coming from the bathroom close to the balcony. A few seconds later, Benson stepped out while drying his gradually receding hairline. How was it? Did you compliment Melissa's new dress? He shot a glance at Klein and asked with a smile. I guess I forgot. All I did was ask where it was done. Klein thought for a moment as he said. Benson immediately chortled and shook his head. How unbecoming of an elder brother. When Melissa received the dress, she couldn't bear putting it down. After rushing to cook and wash the dishes, she immediately wore the dress and has refused to take it off ever since. Wasn't she planning on changing after showering? She can wash and starch the clothes while doing so. Klein subconsciously refuted with the explanation that Melissa had given. Tsk. Benson sighed. It's been scorching the past few days. She was busy in the kitchen for a long time, so I believe she would feel much better doing her homework after a shower. That's right. Klein was suddenly enlightened as he gave his brother a knowing smile. So that's what kind of person you are, Melissa. There's nothing wrong with a girl caring for her appearance. There's no need to find excuses. The corners of his mouth curved up as he shook his head gently before walking into his bedroom. While he was showering, Klein faintly heard knocking downstairs. He immediately wondered, doesn't the worker who's in charge of collecting coins for the gas meter come only once every 2 weeks? Could it be Mrs. Shaud from next door? That can't be. It's said that this lady strictly abides by the etiquette of middle-class society. She would not visit at an inappropriate time. In his puzzlement, Klein wiped dry his body. Wearing old but comfortable shirt and trousers, he came down the stairs. He surveyed the area but did not notice any strangers. He asked, Was someone at the door just now? Benson, who was reading the newspapers casually, said with a smile, It was Bitch Mountbatten, one of the policemen in charge of Iron Cross Street. He asked if we met an 18 or 19-year-old boy who has a rotund face. Heh, he even gave us a sketch to identify. Unfortunately, neither one of us have seen him, or we would have received a reward. What about you? Nope. Klein had a general idea what was happening. Instigator Triss had successfully escaped the evil dragon bar at the harbor. He had escaped somewhere close to Iron Cross Street and Daffodil Street. Therefore, the police were making visits from door to door. And to go this far made it clear that the operation of nabbing the instigator had completely failed. He did not sleep well that night. He kept worrying that the instigator would infiltrate their house to hide, causing another massacre. Thankfully, Daffodil Street was quiet the entire night, with the morning sun rays dispersing all the fog. The relaxed Klein changed into formal attire, wore his top hat, held his cane, and went all the way to Zootaland Street. He greeted Roseanne at the reception hall. "Good morning, Klein," replied Roseanne happily. She suppressed her voice and said, "I heard the huge operation last night failed?" "The operation to nab instigator Triss?" Klein asked in curiosity. "Yeah." Roseanne nodded heavily. She shot a glance at the partition and said, "Apparently, an informant of the mandated punishers discovered the instigator at the harbor. They were planning on waiting for additional Beyonders and another special operations squad from the police to arrive before beginning the operation to do the deed instantly without alarming the commoners. Unfortunately, that instigator was extremely sharp. He charged out of the encirclement when he noticed something amiss, successfully escaping as a result. At such times, they need a Beyonder with tracking abilities, such as me." Klein made a joke. There was no lack of trackers back then. Dunn Smith's voice suddenly sounded. Roseanne turned her head abruptly and saw the captain wearing his black windbreaker. He was glaring right at her with his deep pair of gray eyes while leaning against the partition's frame. She hurriedly raised her hands to cover her mouth. Then she shook her head incessantly, expressing her futile innocence. Dunn turned his gaze to Klein, and after some thought, he said, "There were a total of 6 Beyonders from the mandated punishers, the machinery hive mind, and us Nighthawks. We traced the injured Triss to Iron Cross Street's lower street. We found his temporary residence, but the clues ended there. Be it Beyonder methods or ordinary investigations, nothing worked. It was as though he evaporated into thin air, disappearing completely. Do you need my help with divination?" Klein asked probingly. Dunn shook his head gently. "The machinery hive mind had a machinery hive mind. He is a senior Beyonder as good as old Neil. I even suspect that he's already at sequence 8. I'm just unaware what the name of the corresponding potion is. The Theosophy Order's heritage to this day must have something special about it," consoled Klein. For the rest of the morning, he continued his mysticism curriculum, read the historical information and documents, and practiced various techniques just like always. With lunchtime almost approaching, Klein's mind began to wander. Another few minutes later, he put away the documents, having heard the summoning of his stomach. At that moment, Dunn Smith came into the clerk office. He said in a deep but mild manner, "Klein, follow me to Chanis Gate. Sealed artifact 2-49 has arrived. The subsequent operation might require your sensing of that notebook." "All right," Klein got up and replied. His thoughts became scrambled. He imagined how the sealed item would look, or if the operation would be dangerous. While in this rather tense silence, he followed Dunn down the stairs and into the tunnel. After going straight at the intersection, Dunn suddenly stopped and turned his head, saying sternly, "Do this action together with me. Keep doing it, and absolutely do not stop. Remember, absolutely do not stop. This is for your own safety." While speaking, Dunn bent his arm, followed by extending it. He repeated this action without stopping. Klein looked at the captain demonstrate in a befuddled manner. Suddenly enlightened, he asked, "Has this got to do with the uniqueness of the sealed artifact?" "Yes." Dunn nodded with abnormal seriousness. Repeating such an action will allow us to discover if anything happens to you immediately. Saving you in time will not result in any life-threatening dangers. Okay. Klein did not hesitate further as he began the repeated action of bending and extending his arm. If your arm is sore, use the other one, added Dunn. Sealed artifact 2049 sure is odd. What meaning does this action have? It seems very dangerous. These thoughts flashed past Klein's mind as he looked solemnly at the captain. All right, he had too many questions on his mind, but since Chanis Gate was in sight, he had no choice but to bear with it. Besides, with my security clearance, I'll probably not learn of the details. I can only do as I'm ordered. Klein exhaled as he followed Captain Dunn to the keeper room outside Chanis Gate. Chapter 71. Sluggish Phenomenon. Klein repeatedly bent and extended his arm as he watched Dunn push open the keeper's room with his body sideways. The captain's carefulness and high alertness, as well as the ridiculous and laughable protective actions, left him feeling abnormally tensed. The feeling was identical to what he felt when taking tests of courage that required him to walk through spooky cemeteries at night in his youth. A Grade 2 sealed artifact. Dangerous. To be used with care and moderation, it is something even a formal Nighthawk member does not know the details to. It is unknown how dangerous it is. Amid his tense nerves, Klein found it impossible to curb himself from overthinking. At that moment, his brain suddenly turned numb, as though a power switch had been flicked off. Everything in Klein's vision turned slow. Even his arm actions shared the same fate. He saw Captain Dunn stop in his tracks. He came close to him as though in slow motion, extending his palm out slowly before pushing him in the shoulder. Suddenly, Klein's thought processes and vision were restored to normal at the same time. It was as though everything from before was just an illusion. "What happened?" he whispered amid his fright and confusion. Dunn shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Observe carefully." The moment he finished his sentence, he turned around and walked into the keeper's room. Klein followed closely behind and saw 4 other people in the room. They were either seated or standing. One of them was the midnight poet Leonard. The other 3 were people Klein had never met before. However, all of them shared a common trait. They were all doing the extending and bending arm exercise with utmost seriousness. Klein Moretti has a miraculous connection with the Antigonus family's notebook. Dunn gave a brief introduction. Then, he pointed to the other 3 strangers and said, "These lady and gentlemen are colleagues from the Backland Diocese. They escorted sealed artifact 2049 here. This is Madame Lorata, Sequence 8 Gravedigger. She is a master sharpshooter." At that moment, the black-haired woman, who looked about 30, nodded at Klein in a friendly manner. She looked pretty good. She did not wear a hat, and was dressed in what appeared like male attire. A black coat with a white shirt, tight black trousers, and black leather boots. The corners of her mouth were slightly curved up. After Klein exchanged greetings, Dunn pointed to a man seated behind the desk. "Ayor Harson, someone just like me." Before he finished his sentence, Klein saw Mr. Ayor Harson in his gray windbreaker turn sluggish with his arm motion. It was as though a gear had lost its lubricant or a joint covered in rust. What's wrong? Amid Klein's daze, he saw Lorata push Ayor Harson. Only then did the gentleman's actions return to normal. Was I like that previously? Klein was first taken aback before he came to the realization. This indicated the dangers that sealed artifact 0249 held. What would happen if one was not awoken in time? Would one become a zombie? Filled with questions, Klein greeted the charming, middle-aged Ayor Harson. "Borgia," Dunn said as he pointed to the last Nighthawk. Borgia was a cold man with a knife scar on the side of his face. His sharp brown eyes were like an eagle's. He was constantly observing everyone in the room. "Let's set off. The faster we end this, the faster we can seal 2049, the handsome Ayor Harson said as he stood, his eyes revealing some wrinkles. "So where is 2049? Klein surveyed his surroundings curiously, but did not notice any traces of the sealed artifact. Of course, he could not see the areas obscured by the table without activating his spirit vision. "All right." Dunn turned and looked at Leonard Mitchell. "You'll be in charge of driving. It is best not to involve Cesare with matters like this." Cesare was the clerk in charge of procuring and collecting supplies for the Tingen Nighthawks while standing in as a carriage driver. He was the one who drove Klein to Welch's home to meet the spirit medium daily. "No problem." Leonard stopped acting frivolous and nodded seriously. At that moment, Klein saw Ior Harson bending over. He picked up a black metal chest which had been obscured by the table. The chest was carved with resplendent stars and the crimson full moon. It was as though there was a formless barrier around the chest. The sealed artifact should be inside there. I wonder what 2-49 looks like. Klein observed the chest curiously. Thump, thump, thump. Violent knocking sounds suddenly erupted from the black chest. Even the surface of the chest bulged time and time again. Thump, thump, thump. It was as though something horrifying had awakened within the chest and was pounding wildly. The sound of the knocking was beaten into the hearts of everyone present. "It's alive?" Just as Klein had a thought, he saw Captain Dunn's arm exercises turning sluggish, as if his joints were layered with glue. Borgia, the Nighthawk from Backland, pushed Dunn's shoulder, allowing him to recover. "It's like doing the robot dance when one is affected by 2-49. If all of us are under its influence, wouldn't we be some awkward dance squad?" Luckily, 2-49 seems capable of only influencing one person at a time. Klein lampooned to relax his tense nerves. He did not dare halt his arm exercises. He followed Dunn's lead and left his cane behind. He then followed behind the 5 Nighthawks through the tunnel and up the stairs to the second floor of the Blackthorn Security Company. Leonard had gone ahead and notified everyone in the front of the buildings, so Roseanne and the rest had all made their way to the 3rd level. These incidents rarely involved them, but they were not completely alien to them. Another Nighthawk, Kenley, had replaced Dunn in his watch over Chanis Gate. Klein heaved a sigh of relief when he reached the carriage. He looked suspiciously out the window and said, "Won't 2-49 affect the ordinary people on the streets?" From their journey underground to the carriage, sealed artifact 2-49 had already caused 6 sluggish incidents, 2 of which were targeted at him. He had been jolted awake by Captain Dunn and Leonard Mitchell, respectively. The rate of the sluggish effect was rather alarming. "No worries, 2-49 will target humanoid creatures within 5 meters of it first. The closer you are to it, the easier it is for you to be chosen. As long as there are 3 people surrounding it, people who happen to be around when the carriage steers past will not be affected," the beautiful black-haired Lady Lorata explained with a lazy tone. "What a weird sealed artifact," Klein thought as he continued his arm exercises. Dunn and the rest of the Nighthawks did not speak on the journey to Ray Bieber's house. They were paying close attention to each other's condition. Only Lorata wore a nonchalant look. At times, she took in the sights of Tingen's not-so-clean streets, and at other times, she praised Backland's underground water system. Soon after, the familiar building finally entered Klein's line of sight. The group of 6 made their way to the 3rd level while observing each other. The door to Ray Bieber's house was labeled with the Tingen Police Department's symbol, indicating that entry was forbidden to unauthorized personnel. As Dunn did his stretching exercises, he took out a key. He opened the newly changed lock, then turned around, allowing Ior Harson, who was carrying the black chest, to enter first. Thump, 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 thump! The sealed artifact in the black chest knocked violently once again, even more violent than before. This made Ior Harson's arm waver from side to side uncontrollably. It even made Klein suspect that the chest would be pounded open in time. Thump, thump, thump! Klein quickly noticed that Captain Dunn's movements were becoming sluggish. He was about to wake him up when a buzz sounded in his brain. His brain became numb. The scenes before his eyes played as though they were in slow motion. Didn't they say that? That it only affects one person at a time? Klein's thoughts quickly became sluggish. At this moment, the prepared Lorata and Borgia woke each of them up respectively by pushing them. Having his thought processes and vision restored, Klein looked around with lingering fear. He nearly blurted out,